Tonight, our main speaker is Jim. Help me welcome Jim to the stage.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jim Williams. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Jim.
And I'm from Independence, Kentucky, y'all. And it is by God's grace, the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and great sponsorship that I have been sober 5,193 days, one day at a time. And because I'm from Kentucky, I'm not real good in math. That's a little over 14 years. So I want to thank Kirk for asking me to talk. I'm out here in Arizona visiting, and it wouldn't be possible if it weren't for my friend Darrell and his lovely wife Janet, who have hosted me. I'm in their debt. My story is based on a true story. Most of it happened and some of it didn't. And then there's my recollection. I don't know. I didn't want to be an alcoholic, you know. I thought I was a drug addict with just lots of problems. You know, so for you new people out there, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. I hope you catch alcoholism like I did. And I will apologize in advance. There is alcohol in my story. And I don't know, man. I would never make my life as a comedian because I'm not all that funny. But I grew up in a town called Cincinnati, Ohio. I was born in eastern Kentucky in the coal mines. That's where all my ancestry and my family is from. They wanted to escape the poverty of the coal mines. And when I was 3 years old, my family moved to Cincinnati, Ohio. And I was born in the 50s, and you know, I grew up in my youth in the 60s and 70s, the Woodstock generation. Peace, love, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. That was my mantra. And it was fun for about a minute, you know, from age 13 to about 16. And then after that, I started incurring a lot of consequences, going to kiddie jail, juvenile detention, you know, and my parents were not wealthy by any stretch of the imagination. There's my father, my mother, my sister, and me. And my dad was a hard-working World War II veteran. You know, he joined the Navy in World War II when he was 16 years old, and he saw a lot of really serious combat. And, you know, alcoholism doesn't run in my family. It gallops, you know. My father came from a large family, and so did my mother. My mother had 8 siblings, including her. My father had 10, including him. And a lot of my aunts and uncles were alcoholics. So I was around a lot of alcohol as a kid, and, you know, everybody, they seemed to be functioning. They went to work. They provided for their family, and, you know, there was never any violence, and we were a close-knit family. And, you know, and I just thought that was normal, but I didn't know that, you know, this alcoholism thing is, in my opinion, is genetic, and it's such a family disease, you know. Man, I don't want to get caught up in a huge drunkalogue. I do want to talk about the solution, the steps. But I guess I do need to qualify, you know, to tell you how I drank. And I did a lot of those outside issues, you know. I call them alcohol enhancers, you know. For the record, I only tried crack cocaine one time for about 7 years. Hated every minute of it. You know, it allowed me to drink around the clock, a wide awake drunk and a blackout. Here's what I know today that I didn't know then. And as a teenager, I tried everything described in the book on page 30 and 31 more about alcoholism. Here are some of the methods we have tried, switching from beer to wine, and it goes on and on and on for about 2 paragraphs. And I always had horrific hangovers from drinking it. I didn't know that the phenomenon of craving takes over. When I pick up a drink of alcohol, I can't stop. You know, and then drugs come into the equation. You know, I always just thought I'd changed my mind, you know. And you know, I would always overshoot the mark. I was not a blackout drinker from the beginning. You hear that a lot in AA. Matter of fact, I didn't really even like beer, but I hung out with my buddies. I was 15, they were 18, and they could buy beer in Ohio, and so it's like, I don't feel nothing from this joint, I'll keep trying it. And so I kept drinking the beer till I felt it, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to fit in with the guys, I just wanted to be cool, and I don't know, my father was, just a right-wing conservative, and he really didn't like the hippie generation, and that's what I wanted to be, long hair and, and a bum. And he's like, no, you ain't going to do that. If you stay here, you got to go to work. So academically, I didn't do very good in school. I remember being in high school, and my God, there was just a lot of drugs in the 60s, man. Just stuff they don't even make anymore. And alcohol was hard to get. I always had to get somebody older than me to buy it. Or we would go to the local pony keg and steal it, and then we would go to the park on the weekends and, drink Boone's Farm and Strawberry Hill and Valley High and all that old school screw top wine that they really could probably use for embalming fluid. And I don't know, there was just a lot of drugs, man. There was always pot and LSD and, MDA. I think that's called ecstasy now. And I don't know, by the time I'm like 17 or 18, I probably had tried, just about every pharmaceutical and street drug you could think of, I don't know what I was looking for, but, and alcohol was always there. We were always drinking and, doing, uppers and downers and amphetamines and, meth and Quaaludes and just all that stuff. And, it started causing me a lot of problems, So by the time I'm 17, I've got a heroin habit, And I remember getting kicked out of high school. And I was talking to a young man back here from Iowa. And I told him, I said, yeah, I got kicked out of high school in Cincinnati, and my parents sent me to live with my cousin in Iowa, and I went to a high school out there with the exact same name as the school I got kicked out of, and the only thing that happened was I took me with me. Nothing changed. So after living with my cousin and his wife for a few months, he was much older than me, and they said, look, you got to go. You are just off the hook, too much trouble. We didn't bargain for this. So my parents were getting a divorce, and I don't know, by this time, somehow I managed to graduate high school just barely. I mean, I got permanently expelled. I had to finish it in night school. I got a GED. And a friend of mine got me a job working in the construction trades at the Procter & Gamble company as a laborer, and I just fell in love with the building trades, And but the problem is my alcoholism is continuing to progress and get worse. I'm 18 years old, and I'm drinking a case of beer on the weekend, smoking a half ounce of pot, and doing whatever kind of drugs I can get, and I'm showing up at work late on Monday with a hangover, and just the alcohol just reeks. It's coming out of my pores. I smell like alcohol. And the guy I was working with, he was a pipe fitter. He would laugh at me when I'd come in on Monday mornings because I was 19 years old, and I was just so tore up with bloodshot eyes, and I just smelled like alcohol. He'd laugh. He'd say, "Get the oxygen, Charlie. Here comes Jimmy. He's hungover again." We'd laugh, and man, and I always had these just horrific hangovers, and I fared better on drugs. I didn't have so bad at hangovers. And so, I tried to stop drinking on my own and found out that I could not. And I want to read a little excerpt here. Oddly enough, I've been to a lot of great meetings in my week and a half out here in Prescott. I'm really thrilled that AA is alive and well out here. So this is from the chapter, We Agnostics. It says, if when you honestly want to, you feel, should have brought my glasses, you find you cannot quit drinking entirely, or when drinking, you have little control over the amount you take, you are probably alcoholic. If that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. Now, I didn't come here looking for a spiritual experience. And here's one of the things that I kind of like this theme maybe for this talk tonight. On the next page, page 45, in the We Agnostics, it says, lack of power, that was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves, obviously. But where and how were we to find this power? Well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself for which you can solve your problem. You know, and man, that says a lot to me, because I didn't know anything about Alcoholics Anonymous. It was so anonymous in my neighborhood that nobody ever heard of it. And, you know, but by the time I'm like 20 years old, I'm running around with these guys that are just off the chain outlaw crazy bikers, or trafficking in guns and lots of narcotics, and their MO is they break into safes in the drugstore at night. You know, you can take a concrete block wall and a 25-pound sledgehammer and go around the back of the CVS and bust the wall out. This was before motion detectors, you know, back in the 70s. You know, and so these guys would do that. They'd knock a hole in the wall, and they'd go in, they'd drill a safe, or they'd go through the roof, cut a hole in the roof. And, you know, I was always too chicken to go with them. But when they brought back the heist, just piles of Schedule II narcotics, I was right there like, hey, dude, front me that. I hope you sell that. You know, and what happens is, you know what happens. We become our own bus customer. You know, I'm doing pharmaceutical, morphine, Dilaudid, Demerol, all that stuff, and I'm drinking all the time, you know. And the problem with drugstores is they're habit forming. These guys knocked off about 5 of them, and then the cops caught on, and they you know, surrounded them, and they said freeze, and my buddies scattered, and they opened fire and killed a couple of my buddies. And I thought, man, this is just getting too, you know, that sense of impending doom, like the heat is on, you know. We are great at taking geographical cures. I wanted to quit drinking, is my point. And I just read that I didn't know how, you know. I wanted to stop, and I couldn't, and I didn't know how. So I thought, I got to get away from this crew. These guys are just off the chain. I'll never get sober. I'll never stop doing drugs and alcohol as long as I live in here, because I was convinced that Cincinnati was my problem. Now, the little country town I live in today is just about 30 miles south of there, you know. So I'm not really in the sticks. It's just kind of a nice rural area. But anyway, we're great at starting over and great at geographical cures. You know, there should be a sign at the Florida state line and the California state line saying, it won't work here. Because, you know, I took me with me, and my best laid plans was, I'll join the Army. That's how I'll quit drinking. I'll take some physical exercise. I'll see the world. And while I'm at it, I'll go in there to get a skilled trade that will serve me when I get out. And so I did that. I signed up for 3 years, joined the Army in 1974. And they taught me to be a telephone lineman, which turned out to be a career that served me for, you know, the rest of my life, you know, up until this day. And the problem is, you know, I didn't know anything about Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't have a solution. And I tried all kinds of different things to stop drinking, to distract me from me up here. Bill Wilson talks about it in our book. He says, the alcoholic problem centers in our mind. He learned that from Dr. Silkworth, you know. And so after going to basic training and advanced individual training from Fort Knox to Fort Gorn, Georgia, I was stationed permanent party out here in Arizona in Sierra Vista, 80 miles southeast of Tucson. And I spent about 14 months there as the Vietnam War came to an end. I was rear echelon. I didn't go overseas to Vietnam. But then he came down on orders to send me to Germany. Now, God's got a sense of humor. I joined the Army to quit drinking, and Germany is like the beer capital of the world, you know, and I don't know how to not drink, you know. So, you know, some of the things I tried when I was here in the States was, you know, the military had all kinds of free stuff for the soldiers to do, you know. I became really good at shooting pool. There's a skill you can use in the bar. I joined the craft shop. I learned to make silver and turquoise jewelry from Bisbee. I got really good at it. I tried cave exploring. Lots of caves down in Sierra Vista. I tried horseback riding. They had 200 head of horses. You could ride them for $2 a day. And I tried all this stuff. I went to a lot of different churches on post as a civilian and a military guy. I went to all these different religions. I've read all these self-help books to try to figure this stuff out. I need to quit drinking, And so we just read it here. Lack of power was my dilemma. I had been raised Baptist. I was taken to Sunday school as a kid. I had a fundamental belief in God, and the Sunday school teacher would read us Bible stories and, tell us about Noah's Ark and David and Goliath and all that stuff. And so I had a fundamental belief in God, and I studied the Bible from cover to cover, looking for some answer to absolve me of this alcoholism. And I went to a lot of different churches. I was scattered, smothered, covered, sprinkled, dunked, chunked, told I had to speak in tongues, and you got to do this, and this is the way to heaven. And I'm like, man, nothing's relieving me of this alcoholism. I'm a little bit miffed with this God idea. What's happening? It ain't working. And I don't know, man. I plundered along for, Got to Germany, and man, I just fell in love with that German beer. Oh my God, that stuff was good, and I couldn't hardly leave it alone. And I soldiered on. I did well in the Army. I made rank. I made E5, and I got out with an honorable discharge and a skill set that I could use. But my alcoholism is still progressing. I'm like 22, 25, somewhere in that age group. So I got a job with Bell Telephone. And I worked there for the next 7 years. And I knew that I couldn't drink on the job, not even vodka. If you think you can drink vodka on the job and nobody smells it, that's not true. Don't do that. Smart alcoholic, I thought, I got to have something to make it through the day, so I'll do Percodans. So I'm eating all these Percodans, and I'm climbing telephone poles, working around 7,200 volts of electricity just 2 feet above my head. High as a kite, nodding out, puking. Yeah, man, no problem here, man, I'm cool. My job performance is going down, and they're starting to think something's going on. I've been there 7 years, and they're paying me more money than I ever made in my life. It's prevailing wage. It's a top craft skill. When I was sober, I was really good at this trade, but when I'm high, not so much. And I started getting into trouble. And you can only eat so many Percodans, and there wasn't much heroin at that time. It was cyclical. It comes and goes. And it was dry. Back in the day, they called it a panic. Man, there ain't no dope on the street, So I'd drink in the evening, go to work hungover, and do pain pills during the day so I could make it through the day. And so I'm eating all these Percodans, and they're loaded with aspirin. They're bothering my stomach, so I shot heroin back in the 70s, so let's shoot them. My buddy says, hey, here's how you do them. I'm like, oh, cool. The problem with that is I used up all the veins in my arms, legs, feet. Now I'm shooting dope in my neck. There's a big vein there, and I missed, and I hit the thorax, and I collapsed my lungs. I had to go to the hospital. I told this old school guy that I run with, he's like 5 years older than me, I said, Bobby, I think I'm having a heart attack. He said, what'd you do, man? I said, man, I shot some dope in my neck and I missed. He goes, I've seen this before. I said, well, what is it? He goes, you've collapsed your lungs, dude. I'm like, oh, this don't sound good. He goes, you better go to the emergency room. I said, man, I can't go to the emergency room. The paperwork will catch up to the company doctor and I'll be fired. I'll lose this really good job. I said, what happens if I don't go to the emergency room? He goes, well, dude, you'll be dead in the morning. I'm like, shit, this really don't sound good. All I wanted to do was just make it through the day and get a buzz and be cool. 2 o'clock in the morning, they call out a chest surgeon. I tell him the truth. He's pissed off. I remember him sticking a scalpel right through my rib cage to put chest tubes in there to reinflate both lungs, not one. I had to screw up the other side too. you know, and it was pretty gruesome, you know, like, boom, stick that scalpel in there. I hear that sucking chest wound that they talked about in combat battlefield medicine, you know, and he sticks the tube in there and he's stitching me up, and I'm like, damn, doc, take it easy. He goes, shut up. He's pissed off, you know. I'm like, wow, you know, so I'm laying in the hospital bed for 2 weeks. Did you ever read the story about the jaywalker in the big book? You're looking at him. This was just the beginning of many, many more episodes like that. And it all started with a drink of alcohol. Then I develop a plan. It's usually a good one. Thought of it myself. Man, so I don't know, man. Fast forward, because I don't want to stay stuck on a drunken log, man. This insane alcoholic behavior just goes on for years, man. You know, I eventually got fired from that phone company, and then I'm doing contract telephone line construction. I actually travel out here to Phoenix. I'm working in Phoenix. You know, and my brand new 1997 Ford F-150 4x4 is about to get repossessed because I'm behind on payments because I'm drinking and drugging all my money away. And now I know better than shoot dope in my neck. That's a bad idea. So I'm shooting dope in my groin. There's a big femoral vein down there. And sometimes when you miss, you hit the artery and blood just squirts all over the place. You know, you can't make this shit up. It's too stupid. Who does this? You know? And all the time I'm drinking Ice House beer because I love ice beer because it's got more alcohol in it, you know? And what happened was I got a blood clot in my leg. Couldn't no longer climb telephone poles. So I go on back to the Veterans Administration Hospital in Cincinnati, and they say, you got a blood clot in your leg. I go, oh, this don't sound good. So here's the jaywalker back in the hospital again just a few years later. And this time they said, well, you got to just lay here and see if we can dissolve this with blood thinner. Otherwise, if this blood clot comes loose from your leg, it's going to hit your lungs, and that's called a pulmonary embolism, and you're going to be dead before we can get you to the ER. I'm like, man, this don't sound good. You know, I really wasn't planning on that. So let's get out of the drunken log, you know, and I don't know, man. I recovered from that, and so, you know, I lost that job around 1997 or 1998. I failed to tell you that I had got another job with another phone company. I worked there 12 years, and I stayed relatively dry because my first introduction to Alcoholics Anonymous was in 1981 when I worked at Bell, and I collapsed my lungs. The company doctor said, we're going to send you to the employee assistance counselor. And so he sent me to Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, to get my paper signed. And you know, and I heard people tell their story that I could relate to. And they told me to get a sponsor, and I did. And from 81 to 84, I had 4 sponsors, and every one of them tried to get me to do the steps. And I looked on the wall, and I saw that step 4 and 5, and I thought, that's just none of your business. Those crimes are not yet solved. I ain't doing them steps. That's lame, you know. And the result was I didn't get sober. You know, so I took my newfound Half Measures program, and, you know, I moved to Florida, worked for that other phone company for 12 years, and started, you know, 12 years dry without a solution, man. I'm nuts. I need a drink, so I'm drinking again. Next thing you know, pain pills come to the equation. Next thing you know, I'm fired from that phone company, and you know, and at that time I was at the apex of financial success. I had an 800 credit score. I had money in the bank. I had 3 new vehicles. I had, you know, I was buying stuff to fix me. I went and I lived real close to the Gulf Coast in South Alabama, near the Florida state line. So I need something to relieve my stress. So, egomaniac, I go out and buy like a $100,000 offshore express cruiser boat. I load this thing up with like $8,000 worth of electronics. You know, just insane. I wasn't rich, but I'm projecting an image of somebody that I'm really not. Our book talks about that. You know, so the alcoholic, more than most people, leads a double life. You know, here's the image I want you to see, and inside I'm dying from untreated alcoholism. You know, I met a beautiful woman. We had a little girl, and wasn't a thing wrong with her, man. I had untreated alcoholism, and I caused a divorce, man. You know, I can never go back and change that. But, you know, when I eventually got sober, I was able to make amends. Fast forward, I come to in 2004, you know, I burnt my career job to the ground. I am a destitute skid row bum on a park bench drinking screw top wine, you know, and I'm on 90 milligrams of methadone every day at the Veterans Hospital. I ain't got 2 nickels to rub together. Nobody in my family wants anything to do with me, you know. They're like, please go away. We're done with you. So my mom lets me sleep on her couch. You know, I'm like 50 years old, living on mommy's couch, you know. She's almost 80, and I'm killing her, killing me, you know, and disrespecting my mother. I'm up all night, drinking around the clock in her house. She's gone to bed. I'm smoking crack. I don't even like crack. I hate that shit, you know. And I did 300 milligrams of morphine so I could come down because I'd been awake for a week, you know. And what happened was I accidentally overdosed, you know, and she found me laying dead on the floor on December 2nd, 2004. Called the paramedics, and they hit me with Narcan and revived me. Otherwise, you'd have a different speaker here tonight, and I'm so grateful. You know, and it was 12 below zero that morning. There was a foot of snow on the ground. It was blizzard cold, and I'm wearing my T-shirt and my skivvies, and I'm sweating bullets, and they got me strapped down tight in the back of the emergency room vehicle and the ambulance, and I'm puking buckets of blood on the way to the hospital. And I thought, man, this drinking's just not working out. You know, and I had a moment of clarity. I remember my father standing at the bed, you know, in the emergency room, and he's looking at me with that look, you know that look, that utter disgust, like, what is wrong with you? Why can't you stop? And I had no answers. I was out of plans. That's the good news. If you're out of plans, Alcoholics Anonymous can help you. If you're the alcoholic of my type, there's hope here. You know, I got out of there and I got into a homeless shelter that was actually just an old wooden army barracks up in the woods in Cincinnati, you know, and you could hear the wind whistling through the cracks in the wintertime. But the thing they had was they had AA meetings there, and there was this guy coming and chairing these meetings. And I'm watching him, you know, and I'm about 2 weeks sober, and I'm just coming unglued, man. I'm like, I know that if I drink again, I'm a goner. And so I asked him, you know, and he's happy, and he's smiling, he's laughing, he's joking, he's driving a nice vehicle, he's got a gold chain. Hi, my name's Steve, I'm alcoholic. I'm like, what is so funny in this dude's life? Ain't nothing funny in mine. I went down on the hood prior to overdosing, and the dope boy says, damn, you look bad. When them guys feel sorry for you, you're dying. I was like 135, 40 pounds. I had just circles under my eyes. I looked like a corpse. So I asked this guy, I said, man, what do I have to do to get sober? He found out by talking with me that I had been an auxiliary member of AA on the Half Measures program, thank you very much. I had never worked any of the steps. And we went over step 1, 2, and 3 right away. I said, I'm good with this God thing, but every denomination I've tried couldn't relieve my alcoholism. I'm just baffled. He said, why don't we do the steps? He presented me with a piece of paper. It was a 4-step inventory, straight out of the big book from the Joe and Charlie series, and I filled in the blanks, you know, because my brain was so scrambled I couldn't think. It took me about a week or 10 days. So at about 45 days sober, I'm sharing this step 4 or 5 with this man that I don't even hardly know, and I'm crying. It's painful, but I was honest with another human being for the first time in decades, you know, and I put down my resentments, and in a kind way he pointed out to me where I had set all those events in motion, you know, and it was like a revelation. You know, one day I woke up at about 45 days sober in the homeless shelter, and the obsession to drink was removed, and I was astonished. I thought, man, that's the spiritual experience they've been talking about all these years that I've been in and out of AA. You know, I couldn't connect the dots. And I saw hope, and I was just blown away. I got on fire for Alcoholics Anonymous, and I got out of that homeless shelter and got into a little better homeless shelter called the Veterans Domiciliary. I know you got one here. I've been to it. And the VA Dom saved my life. You know, so that was in the town of Fort Thomas, Kentucky. just across the river from Cincinnati. And he said, get a home group. I got a home group. He said, get a service position. I got a service position. I wanted to give out the coins because I thought those guys were cool because they got to hug the pretty girls. You know, whatever keeps you coming back, you know. And one day we ran out of coins, and, you know, my home group members at the group conscience, I said, hey, we're out of coins. They said, go get some. I'm like, you're not listening to me. I'm in a homeless shelter. I got no money, no job, no credit, no driver's license. They're suspended. You know, no car. They said, here's the money, here's the bus schedule, here's the directions. We'll see you when you get back. I'm like, damn. You know, took 2 buses, hour and a half, 2 hours to transfer down, back, up, back, and get the coins, come back. It's time for the meeting. I'm like, wow. You know, I've had a service position at that home group. It's Happy, Joyous, and Free. They meet Wednesday night, 7 p.m. in Fort Thomas, Kentucky. If you're ever that way, look us up. It's a very large group, about 200 people. Lots of laughter, lots of good sobriety. You know, they have real coffee cups and lots of snacks. You know, and my service position is bring snacks and take out the trash. And I love doing that. I like to show up early for the meeting, and I like to stay late. My sponsor taught me that. I was about 2 years sober, and he took me to Akron to Founders Day, and I was just blown away by 30,000 people in the college campus auditorium there in Akron at the end of the last speaker, and they're all holding hands, you know, saying the Lord's Prayer and then singing Amazing Grace. You could just feel the electricity in the air. I'm like, wow. You know, and I got to go see Dr. Bob's house and the graveside. It was a 3-day shebang for the weekend. It was just awesome. I've been to Akron twice. Been involved in Alcoholics Anonymous. My home group members got me involved in roundups and conferences. I served on the Rule 62 committee for about 7 years. I served on the Buckeye Roundup for about 2 years, and it was a blast. You know, you're trying to get 20 alcoholics in a room to agree on anything. Good luck, you know. But the conferences always came off a success, and it was a lot of fun. In 2010, I got to go to the International in San Antonio with my sponsor. You know, if you're not on probation and you got a job, you actually have money left over to do stuff like that. You know, I was astonished. I'm like, wow, I've got no money in my pocket. And more importantly, as I went through the steps, when I got to step 8, in my case, very early, like 50 days sober, I'm looking at step 8, at which point I balked. I said, you have got to be kidding me, man. There's hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of wreckage here that I'll never be able to make right. He goes, never say never in Alcoholics Anonymous, Jim. Just become willing, you know. And 5 years later, that list seemed doable. You know, I'd received a check, a $102,000 check in my bank account for a settlement. You know, and I called my sponsor, you know, and I said, you ain't going to believe this, man, but I think I can make those amends. He just laughed, you know. Some of the first amends I made was to my parents. You know, I got to pay them back $14,000 that I owed them, you know, from them bailing me out of constant scrapes, you know. And then, you know, some people that weren't even on my 8-step list. If you don't know who you owe, pull your credit report. They know. Like, oh, those people, I forgot all about them. You know, I had bad checks all over town. You know, I was a paper hanger, hung checks everywhere. You know, I'm in the Veterans Domiciliary at, you know, at about 6 months sober. I'm jumping back and forth through time here. I'm a time traveler. And detective calls my family one day looking for me. You know, and I tell my sponsor, you know, I said, man, I think I'm going to jail. He goes, what for? I said, well, it's all these checks I forged. He goes, he gets out the book. He reads steps 8 and 9 to me out of the book. Talks about we make the best terms we can get. He says, just tell him the truth. Tell him you're 6 months sober in Alcoholics Anonymous and you have the ability to pay these checks off, which, you know, the benefits counselor came around and says, you know, would you like a non-service connected disability check for your service during the Vietnam era? I said, wasn't in Vietnam. He goes, I know that. Do you want a check? I went, well, duh. You know, so just miracles started to happen. So I called this detective up, and I'm shaking my head like my sponsor is not listening to what I'm saying. You know, anytime I've ever called the police up and they said, come down here, we want to talk to you, it never went well. You know what I mean? But I called this detective and I told him the truth, and I said, will you allow me to pay these off without prosecution? And there was a long pause on the phone. He said, for some reason, I believe you. Come on down here, pay them off, and we'll tear them up and call it even. And if you're not here in 36 hours, I can promise you, you're probably going to do 5 years at Ohio State Penitentiary somewhere. I'll be right there, dude. You know? And so I got to clean up the wreckage of my past. The book says years of reconstruction lie ahead, and that's been certainly true in my case. You know, I'm a guy that got kicked out of high school. Academically, I was just a total failure, and I felt so less than, so uneducated, like just a dumb hillbilly, you know. And I was about a year and a half sober, and I asked my sponsor, I said, man, I really would like to go back to school to get a degree in construction management. He said, Jim, the sky's the limit. You can do anything as long as you put God and Alcoholics Anonymous first. You know, so 5 years later, I graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Construction Management from Northern Kentucky University. Education will not keep me sober. I told my sponsor, I had a conversation with him, I said, man, if this college gets to be overwhelming, it's got to go. I said, I have to keep AA first. He goes, that's right. You know, and he said, just do what we learned here. You read the book, you study, you show up, and you get a passing grade in life. Bill Wilson calls this a design for living that works. I don't want to run over. I just need to wrap this up. I got to make amends to my parents, my mother, the last 6 years of her life. I got to be a good son and do the things that she wanted to do. What a miracle. I got to be a good son to my father the last 10 years of his life. And we hung out together and we became good friends because there was always just so much friction between he and I because we're so much alike. And there was nothing left unsaid when my parents passed. And it was a beautiful funeral, you know, and my family appointed me to, you know, write the eulogy and be in charge of all their affairs. You know, the guy who stole from their slender purse. You know, my whole family's been put back together because of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, and it's just a miracle, man. My daughter, she has 8 years sobriety now. I have grandkids. I have just a fabulous life. You know, I've cleaned up all areas in my life, and I'm current with everybody. I call my sponsor on a regular basis. I am a sponsor. I have a lot of sponsees. My sponsor has a sponsor. I come from a very strong sponsorship family. You know, we believe in reading the book, studying the book, and doing what it says, you know, and bouncing our ideas off of each other, because my thinking at 14 years sober still ain't all there. Thanks for letting me share. I'm Jim, alcoholic.